Friday. My name is Gardy. This is Clear Life Combat, and I have a guest that is zooming in. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are going on in the MMA and Jiu Jitsu world. Hey, how you doing?
Good. I'm Jason Soliz of TX Third Coast MMA out of Stafford, Texas. And man, I'm happy to be here.
Uh,
Thanks for having me on.
of course, yeah. Thank you for making some time. It's a nice day. We've kind of had some crazy stuff going on weather wise, but it's really nice. What does Friday normally look like for you?
And my Fridays are they're kind of like a little bit of a personal day as far as trying to get whatever it is I need done. I try to push everything off until Fridays as far as my scheduling and things like that, just because we put a lot of priority first into a lot of our students. So the majority of my week spent from like 5 a.m. all the way until about 10 o'clock at night is doing pad sessions, drilling with people, jujitsu practices, kickboxing, Muay Thai, um, Q&As, structuring classes, and then every little thing that goes on in between there is pretty much taken up for the rest of the week. So Fridays, I usually try to get my own workout done, but then I also try to take care of any type of family stuff or whatever it is that I try to put off till the end of the week. Probably maybe not the best strategy, but I mean, it's been working so far. So
Yeah, being a coach, being a gym owner, running the gym, you have your own career, but sometimes you kind of push some of those things off to for your fighters and your people. Is that
oh
correct?
yeah, yeah, definitely, man. That's yeah, I'm not as much competing anymore quite as I used to. I used to compete a lot. That used to be my main focus, was competing professionally in jiu-jitsu, amateur boxing, amateur kickboxing, Muay Thai, and then of course professional MMA. I only had one amateur MMA fight, and I had to go pro just because I could never find any fights because everybody knew me from jiu-jitsu and I was already a black belt, so nobody wanted to take the fights. And I, I I set a bunch of goals for myself over the couple of years that competitively I wanted to reach, and I accomplished them. And it's just once I accomplished them, it was kind of like I saw the involvement and how it kind of motivated everybody. And after watching how it motivated everybody, it got me motivated to take on more of the coaching side of things and try to push these guys to develop. But then also, if they just had like personal goals that they just wanted to accomplish, that was a big deal. I love helping a lot of these guys accomplish these personal goals. And even though it's tough, and have a little bit of a reputation for being kind of a stiff coach on some of this stuff. It's extremely rewarding. I like watching these guys like develop, and then hearing like how happy they get after seeing they've accomplished all the stuff they've accomplished. It's definitely rewarding.
Can you tell me, where is Texas Third Coast MMA located, and what all do y'all offer?
We're located in Stafford. We actually used to be in Sugar Land. We just moved maybe about the start of the year, about maybe a week and a half in. We just moved to Stafford from the Sugar Land location, which is actually like maybe two or three lights down from our old location. So it's not that giant of a move. However, the spacing is definitely way better in my opinion, just because the floor has easier access. We had a giant facility at the last place too. The only problem is the structure of it was kind of awkward. And now that we have the proper structure, we've been able to develop more of the classes and the capacity that we have for each class. So we have the kickboxing, which we consider like an MMA kickboxing, because it focuses on primarily the stand-up portions of like maybe a catch can shoot box entries for stand-up, all the way into the kickboxing movements and how you would kind of structure Muay Thai or kickboxing for an MMA mindset, and then dealing with the takedowns. Then we have a strictly boxing class. We are registered under USA Boxing for the Olympic committees, so we keep up our registrations for all that stuff. We do compete in boxing, amateur boxing. We don't have any pro boxers right now. We have maybe on task right now a couple of pro MMA guys that we're working with,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody's pretty much amateur. And then we have, of course, the jiu-jitsu program, which is pretty extensive. Um, that's on usually on Monday, Wednesday, almost every single night, actually. And even on like Fridays, it's funny that you say like what the Friday looks like, just because even on Friday nights, man, we're going to be here. I'm here right now, and I was here at 9 a.m. I'm probably not going to leave here until about 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, just because we have a jujitsu competition set aside, just something that we like to work with the guys on. And then we have a developmental MMA program that we run little bit more intense sparring in the evenings. So these guys will probably be coming in a little bit later tonight as well. And then on top of that, we also have what we consider submission grappling. We don't call it necessarily no-gi just because I've had a lot of practice over the years with other things. So and so is Professor Joe, our other head instructor. And so we mix judo, freestyle wrestling. He has his catch can background. Of course, there's some sambo and things like that mixed in there. Greco, I love Greco or like classical style wrestling. And then, of course, just your typical Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and all the nuances that have happened with that lately. So there's all that stuff that's thrown into that class as well. And those are the main classes, but we also teach one-on-one sessions for Jeet Kune Do, which is, I think everybody understands Jeet Kune Do from Bruce Lee. So we teach a lot of that stuff. We teach a lot of hand-to-hand combatives. We actually all have backgrounds in Filipino martial arts, so FMA, things to deal with traditional weapons, improvised scenario training. It's definitely not that Detroit urban survival stuff. So we're not pulling guns and trying to teach everybody how to disarm sliding barrel or anything like that. But yeah, it's we consider it more real world application and one-on-one stuff. So it deals with some different situations and kind of touchy subjects. So we try to make it more of a one-on-one thing than just trying to market it to an entire class, because not everybody's interested in some of that stuff. And it's kind of scary to some people if they first come in.
Yeah.
But yeah, we teach all kinds of stuff here.
And who is like, is there an ideal person who your gym is for? Is it all over the board?
Man, we are all over the board. And I would say we've turned into a competitive team over the years, although that was never the intent. It just so happened to go along that route because we had so much fun and spent so much time on the floor with everybody trying to develop not just my skills, but Professor and, everybody else, that it's turned into people having a lot of confidence in themselves and wanting to test their skills and kind of seeing, I guess, leading by example. A lot of the guys going out themselves and trying to do MMA fights, Muay Thai, boxing, even going to other schools, and we train with other people too on a regular occasion. We may not put it up or anything like that, but we're all over the place. So I would say we were here for hobbyists and the regular normal people that just like to train, live the lifestyle. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be a competitor or you want to do any of the other stuff too, that's great. But in our personal opinion, I guess it gets a little more philosophical and it goes into more of the martial artist aspect because, we train everything. I know I have a reputation myself, and Professor does too, for being jiu-jitsu coaches, but I've been doing stand-up for probably longer than I've been doing jiu-jitsu, and so has he. So we look at it from like all perspectives, all the concepts and things like that involved in all the arts. It's a very martial artist take on the team. And the reason I say that is just because we have the fighters that come in. And the unique thing that I like about our fighters that we enjoy is that the guys don't just show up for themselves. I understand being selfish for being a fighter just because you kind of need to be. You need to focus on what you're doing. You need to focus on your diet. You need to focus on injury maintenance and things like that. But these guys come in every single night, and even though they train hard and they do intense rounds with each other, they also contribute back to the group, which is probably one of the differentiating factors in what we have here, just because you'll see the guys that have been fighting like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 fights, like Sean Soliz, for example, is one of our pro fighters. And Sean's he's got such a extensive background in all kinds of stuff. But you see him in here from night to night, and nobody even knows who they're talking to sometimes when they first come in, because some of these guys don't, frequent the scene. But he's sitting there working with them, drilling with them, sparring with them or feeding pads for them. And he's giving back to the group just as much as, I think you met Danielle already, and she does the same thing. A lot of the other black belts that we have on the floor, as well as the lower ranked people, or the people who don't just do jiu-jitsu, that do boxing, kickboxing, do the same as well. So yeah, we're more of a martial arts based kind of gym, but we're also like the hobbyist. And if you want to compete, there's always room for that too.
And I was going to ask that, what else sets y'all apart from, the other gyms that are out there? You answered one of the part of that is just like focusing on the big martial arts, like, like everything, right? What else sets y'all apart, makes y'all different?
Well, hopefully this doesn't come across the wrong way, but we don't have any plans necessarily to make a chain of gyms or trying to venture out to create a second spot. Um, we're kind of like a quality over quantity idea. So what we focus on here, like I said, is your average everyday people that if they have other aspirations and they have other goals, that's great. We can help them get to that too. But when you're training here, you're training under like direct supervision of your immediate instructors. That's not to say that doesn't happen anywhere else. It's just we're so much on the floor every night, so hands-on that like by the end of the night, just running around the floor, like helping people and being so hands-on with it. I mean, I'm basically putting in a workout every night. We're working every night, and it's an enjoyable process just because we get a chance to train with our guys. I know sometimes when you go to some of these other places or you go to these other teams, you hear the name of an instructor, you hear the name of a coach or something, and maybe your head coach or your founding members is in the New England area and you're all the way down in like Arizona or something, or they're founding members in Colorado and you're all the way down in Florida, or somebody's in Canada and you're all the way down in Texas. It's like you're in the organization, and that's cool, and that's not anything to shame on organizations. Great, clearly there's something that they're doing right, but we are here every night with our people, and they get a chance to interact with us on a regular basis. We get a chance to give input if they have questions and things like that. We can both answer it. You can get different perspectives from the different instructors that are in the room. And I mean, honestly, we train with our guys just as much as almost any other person that's on the floor with them. We try to anyway. I try to make my way around to almost every single person at least once a week. And we have a couple hundred members, so that's a pretty good work week in my opinion. But it's fun. It's work, but it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's a genuine love for everything we do. So it's not just like a regular thing. Even at night, like it's hard to turn off. Professor Joe will tell you this if you ever get a chance to talk to him. Is we're up when we get home at like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night to eat, but work is not done yet because we're doing video study. I do pad sessions for some of these guys in the evening, so I'm breaking down technical work. Oh, their knee's not turning here, or maybe the jab needs to come up a little bit more. Oh, this guy was doing a good leg lock entry, but maybe we should add this to it. Oh, we need to focus on wrestling for the next couple of weeks because these guys need it, because this guy's strategy is to pull off this. And it's just constant study, constant work, constant breakdowns. And it's funny because they'll message us at like 2:00 in the morning, not expecting to get a response. And we come back with like 2 or 3 responses, and they're like, oh my God, you guys are still up. Yeah, we're studying.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it is. It's I guess that's what differentiates us. We're just maybe a little fanatical, but it's a fanaticism of love, if you want to say that.
How long has Texas Third Coast MMA been around, and I guess what actually led to the start of it?
Man, we've been around as a gym about 10 years now, a little over 10 years probably. In our individual training and coaching, I'm going to be 33 this year. I started training and coaching when I was about 14 or 15. So probably about like maybe half my life, a little over half my life at this point. And then my father, Professor Joe, he's over 30 years experience probably now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And he dates all the way back to boxing back I think in the 80s and 90s, professionally, amateur. If there was MMA around back then, he probably would have been doing that too. But it was still developing scene at that time. And I remember that stuff when I was coming up back in the early 90s. It's interesting to think about just because it doesn't feel like we've been around that long, but maybe 30 years plus experience. And it just kind of seems like a flash when you think about it. But at the same time, you really start putting the details and you're like, oh man, I was around back before the late 80s, early 90s, remembering all the dark ages of MMA, and then the Jiu Jitsu era when, you started seeing all these crazy uniforms come out. And the same thing with the boxing era when you used to see all the guys coming out like the Hagler Hearnses. And man, it's great. We've been around for such a long time that I feel really like grateful to have experienced a lot of this stuff. Probably a little bit more than I probably should have been looking at that age and being involved in those things. But it's been around for a while. So we've been coaching maybe 20 years
Yeah. And I mean,
And
like you mentioned, you were kind of immersed in it, grew up in it. I was talking
yeah,
to my wife maybe 2 days ago about MMA. And I was like, well, that was before like MMA was a thing. She was like, what? MMA wasn't a thing like in the like 80s or something like that. I was like, I don't think so. It wasn't till the UFC kind of came in and then it was created, right?
yeah, it was, man, we call it the dark ages, but that was like back when they used to basically refer to us as like human cockfighting, basically,
Hmm.
is what they used to view us as. Or if you saw any of the videos, a lot of stuff was actually kind of illegal to get out of certain states just because it was videos that you'd order out of the back of a black belt magazine, and the videos would come in and it's all this grainy footage, or it looked like something that came out of the old Gracie Mag videos, and you're looking at it and you don't know who you're looking at, but it's these two people going toe to toe, bare knuckle, and this is like maybe 92, 93, and it's probably some fights that were, for whatever reason, between two individuals that had bad blood, or maybe it was a sport fight between two gyms. And yeah, I remember seeing that when I was a lot younger, as well as like the jiu-jitsu scene. Man, the jiu-jitsu scene back then too had a lot of like I guess what you'd consider Vale Tudo style involvement, where there'd be a lot of like kind of underground events going on, bare knuckle events. I remember being at a couple of shows that, you know, or not shows, but tournaments that before jiu-jitsu got developed, it was everybody versus everybody, regardless of the size and the strength and rank. You got on the floor, and then if there's a dispute between the two coaches, well, they had their fight shorts on and everybody came to the floor, and that's what happened. Yeah, it was a time, man. Looking back on it, you never would have thought it would have developed into something this, you know, expansive and consuming, but at the same time professional now, because it's so much more professional than it used to be, and it's really cool watching it.
Yeah. And now, I mean, looking back on it, it's like, hey, if you have an issue with someone, it makes sense to resolve it, as long as you
Yeah,
can. In a way, UFC's having an event. I think, this weekend it's, Masvidal versus Colby Covington, and they still kind of have their
yeah,
beef, and stuff. And so it's like
yeah.
a lot of it's
I've been
marketing.
listening to that
Yeah.
trash talk.
Yeah. It's entertaining, if anything, and it's evolved into so much more. You being exposed to that, early on, did you immediately say, I want to do that, or I want to learn more?
I don't remember saying that I actually wanted to fight MMA until maybe I got to blue belt in jiu-jitsu, which I had gone through all the kids ranks before there were all the pre-ranks in between there. And back then, I don't ever remember getting stripes until I got to purple belt. Stripes weren't a thing back then. It was just a solid bar, and you ranked up. And I remember seeing a lot of this stuff and being involved in it. And then, of course, as a kid, we used to stay up. I used to stay up with my dad until like 3 or 4 in the morning, trying to catch the old Pride FCs when they'd come on from Japan. You'd have to, watch the pay-per-view at their time. So you're sitting there watching these guys go toe to toe. You're like, oh man, it looks so cool being on that stage. And then a couple of years later, thinking, oh, I think I could do that, And then a couple of years later, actually, right around 15 and 16, I actually did do some stuff, but it wasn't necessarily on record, and it was, like I said, it was still beginning baby stages of everything. So I was doing like stuff at 15 and 16 that a lot of the guys now are probably waiting till they're like 20s, developed a lot more bodily wise. I was just a kid back then, and I got a chance to touch into it and do all that stuff. Um, but it was how do you say, a lot more rough and tumble
Yeah.
than it is now. Like it's a lot more refined now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but that was kind of how I got my exposure to it and thought that I wanted to do into it. The more and more I got into it in the pros, I started doing it more, and then I accomplished a couple of goals that I wanted to accomplish, and it became more about a general love for all of it than it did necessarily just love for it and love competing. I still love to compete. I compete through the guys all the time whenever they go out to fight. I actually get more nervous for them
Yeah.
as a coach than I ever got for myself trying to fight or compete, just because all these things run through your head when you're out there. Now I know what my dad was going through whenever I was, in the ring, is you're thinking, oh, did I prepare him enough? Did you show him the right, technique for the jab? Are they fast enough to do this? Do they have the cardio to do this? Maybe we should have backed off a little bit in the training. That was a little bit too hard. Maybe you should have gone a little bit harder. All these things, these variables run through your head. And that's kind of what it nerve wracks you as a coach, that you just wish you could do everything that, like, if you could just upload a USB to their head and, just download all the information you could and give them all the access to it. You wish you could do it. That's kind of like what you feel like. And then looking back on it now, whenever I did start, how little information I did know, but it felt like a lot,
Right.
It's a whole different animal now.
They did that in the Matrix movie where
Oh, I know,
Neo
right?
learns, he's like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? I'm going to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I didn't even realize that because, I remember watching the movie, in theaters or at home, I don't know, whatever. But then I saw that clip the other day. I was like, they did say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. And then if you look at it, it's cool. Here's one thing that's fun to look at too. We used to do this all the time, is when you would go back and you look at the ending credits. A lot of people don't want to stick around for the ending credits, but if you're a martial arts fanatic, you stick around, you watch some of this stuff because you want to watch the choreography. So you want to see who's doing the choreography. And a lot of the guys are like Jeff Amata and like Bill Wallace. You used to see all these guys come out there from different backgrounds, and then you'd see the Machado brothers jump in there. They're heavily involved in the scene now. I think they're even doing a lot of the stuff for the Wick movies along with Terran Tactical. So you get to see the names and stuff pop out on there that you remember, like some of these guys in the early scene. Like I remember conversating with I think it was Carlos Machado, like back when I was like a yellow belt. I was like a kid. I think I might have been like 12 or 11 years old. And he was just sitting on a chair. And to me, I was like, oh my God, that's Carlos Machado. I was like, oh, starstruck about it. And then he's just sitting there, like, running the tournament. And then lo and behold, like maybe 5 or 6 years later, he's on the credits of a movie doing the choreography for, whoever. And you're like, oh my God, he does that too. So it's cool to see all the martial arts guys venture out into that aspect too.
Yeah. Whenever you were growing up at the kid ranks, were there a lot of kids that were training?
Man, that's what made it rough. That's probably why I did some things back then, probably that I probably shouldn't have been allowed to, just because of the lack of participation from kids. My first competitions, I think I was maybe 10 years old, were full contact karate. And then after the full contact, I started doing heavily jiu-jitsu competitions. And I think I was about 12 years old, and they had 0 kids. I was a fat kid too. So I was pretty thick when I was little, but I was not small enough that there was enough kids, even though there weren't any kids. But I was also right around the same size that you could be for, say, like 135, 145, 160s athletes in the adult division. So at about 11 and 12 years old, I was competing in men's adults divisions. And that's kind of how I got, I guess, a little bit of notoriety on the scene, just because I was this, little snot-nosed kid running around trying to jump on guys' backs and, hold on to the legs for dear life so I don't get bucked off. But, that was kind of how I got my start for competition in the more intense areas. But man, I don't remember seeing any kids competitions, or at least in the US, until about, I think I got to purple belt. And, Fight to Win actually had a lot to do with that stuff. Seth Daniels and those guys, giving him credit on that, is just because they were running jiu-jitsu competitions before they started doing their live shows. And, Seth had a pretty extensive breakdown for the kids divisions from weight class. And it was kind of one of the first times too that I had seen that developed of a kids division, and just thinking in my head, man, how cool would it have been to have been competing at that level for a developmental league like kids divisions, so props to Seth for that. And now you see where he's at with his organization and how much it's grown and how much work he's put into it. And clearly he's, he's a contributor to the scene. Everybody's grateful to him for that.
Yeah. They're like nearing 200, Fight to Win 200, I believe. You mentioned.
And then the Subs on the Shore guys too. The Subs on the Shore guys, man, they put a pretty extensive show together as well. They, I like how pre-planned out it is when they get going, just because they hit everybody up, weeks or months in advance to make sure that you have the free time to do it. And instead of just telling you, like kind of like how some jiu-jitsu tournaments do every now and then, that, oh, hey, here's one 2 weeks from now, and you just jump in there. Some people like to prepare like that. Some people don't like to be that quick about it. But, as a coach, I like to kind of have the dates planned out, just because I'm really bad at keeping dates. I put everything in on my phone. And I just get the reminders through that just because we always have stuff on the books all the time. Fight
Yeah.
dates, jiu-jitsu competitions, boxing, you name it. I look at my phone constantly just to remind myself of that stuff.
Earlier you mentioned Bill Wallace. Is that Bill Superfoot Wallace? Is that who that is?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I've heard of him through Al Garza, Grandmaster Garza.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Al Garza. Yeah.
That's where I
Yeah.
train at Al Garza's Premier Martial Arts, and he's been, in the martial arts community for 40 something years, in Dickinson, Texas, and stuff like that. And so I know I've heard him mentioned before, and just the tournaments and stuff. So I just wanted to clarify. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's who that is.
Yeah. Al's got a lot of background. And, I've known Al too for several years. He probably doesn't remember me all that well, but I know he knows my father really well. They frequented the scene for a while. A lot of the groups out there, a lot of the full contact guys back in the day are that are still around, that are still like teaching and running their schools. I it's really cool to watch them kind of like make their evolution into the new era of it, just because they clearly see that stuff. Like you have like some of these new organizations coming up. Like one of the ones that we have is with Master Zulfi Ahmed, and he's out of Pasadena area going towards Deer Park, and we have a combative games league that's coming up, and part of the idea is a developmental program, not just to compete, but like kind of make it more palatable as MMA in general, as opposed to just, sticking somebody in a cage and just saying, here's some 4-ounce gloves, let's get at it. It's geared more towards developing athletes, not just kids. Yeah, there's a lot of kids involved in it, but there's a lot of adults too that maybe you had some hesitation about wanting to get into it because you don't want to get punched in the face or, get bruised up and have to go to work like that. So we tried to make it the idea with some of the input from a lot of the traditional and evolutionary guys coming up in it, that, hey, there needs to be a structure about it, that you can do this safely. It needs to be palatable for every individual involved, including the guys that go up to professional levels. But then also it should be fun, which is why we made it like games in the term, just because combative games as opposed to fight league. The fight's great, but fight kind of has a little bit of a negativity attached to it sometimes. And, not everybody wants to be in a fight. Some guys just want to have fun. So,
yeah. Well, that's awesome. That is really cool. If you're just now joining us, I'm talking to Jason Soliz at Texas Third Coast MMA. I was wondering this earlier, and I was going to bring this up. So I didn't ask this question, and it was brought up in conversation. I was talking to Nico at ACS over in Lamarck. They're under Team Took, and Nico had said, sanctioned and unsanctioned, he's probably had like 40-something fights. I think that was like MMA. And I was like, really? His record, he's 11 wins or whatever, and I was just, man, like 40-something fights, but that was counting like smokers and stuff. If you had to guess, or maybe how many fights, smokers, do you think that you've had, even, tournament wins and everything?
Man, I think I've lost count. It's not including jiu-jitsu tournaments. It's probably close to up there. And like, if it's just striking stuff, probably close to around 60, maybe a little bit up past that. MMA, man, I lost count of how many of those were, just because we used to have like what we'd consider, I guess, challenge matches back in the day, where the guys would come in and, me and a couple of guys would flip a coin for who got to take the matchup. So we took 3-minute rounds. We had a cage at the time for the old place that we were at. We'd get in there and, they were doing tryouts, right? So as they'd get in there, I'd try to keep it as kosher as possible. I didn't want to beat anybody up, so I just rely on submissions. So instead of boxing the guy up, I'd shoot in, take him down, and pin him to the floor, go for a choke, and they tap, right? But it was still, not looking back on it, just because I was kind of like a little bit of a indestructible teen, years that you don't really factor in that kind of stuff, that it could be that seriously dangerous. But I got into the cage on several occasions like that. Again, I lost count. There's probably a bunch of people out there I know for a fact that have a bunch of stories about it that I honestly probably just don't remember all the details, but I know they do. And it's, man, just the number of that, as well as jiu-jitsu stuff, man, that's jiu-jitsu stuff too. In the kickboxing, probably well into like close to 200, 300 range. I don't really consider the jiu-jitsu matches fights, just because jiu-jitsu was never something negative to me. And I always loved like competing. It was intense, you know, don't get me wrong. I had the fight mentality for it, but it was never to get in there and like try to necessarily hurt somebody. You know, it was always about trying to win the match or, you know, going for the sub. And I even lost matches doing that kind of stuff, trying to chase the sub all the time, just because I never wanted to be a boring fighter. You know, I never took inspiration just from jiu-jitsu people. Like one of my favorite fights or fighters was Arturo Gatti. And, you know, I never wanted to be boring. I used to love watching like old replays of Arturo Gatti's fights because it was always interesting. You know, like Gatti Ward trilogy. Um, there's several other fighters out there like Duran used to be really entertaining. You know, Leonard, a lot of the old boxers and stuff. I love that whole era of like 80s, 90s boxing just because it was back whenever the guys were not just fighters, but they were also entertainers, but it wasn't quite to the level where you see these people kind of just doing the whole YouTube showcase now where they get to kind of just gloat basically for their own benefit. You know, these guys had a little bit of a more of a martial artist take, in my opinion, but then also they had a fight mentality and a respect for the game that they were in, and that was enjoyable to watch. So, you know, I had inspiration from all over the place. Just so happened though we didn't have YouTube back then all that far, but when YouTube came up, then I was watching stuff like that all the time.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned subs on the show before, and I had the chance to talk to Danielle Guevara, and she was sharing, well, she's going to be competing there. Can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, that promotion and what you think about the platform that they give to the female athletes?
So the subs on the shore is interesting, as well as like, in my opinion, just the whole idea of female only events, because, you know, we're in a predominantly male based sport. And for any type of like women to stand out, it's kind of cool, you know, like it not only says a lot about how tough they are, but it also says a lot about how technical they are. A lot of times you see them being more technical than guys. A lot of the matches are really fun to watch. Um, I've trained with guys, with few guys, the majority of my life, but my first training partners actually were female, in particular female blue and purple belts, and that's actually how I got cauliflower ear. Was that I was, like I said, I was not quite the size of most of the men in the room to where I could, you know, roll with them or anything like that, but I was just about the right size for, you know, a female competitor, a female practitioner to box or to do jiu-jitsu with. So, man, my respect went up immensely whenever I'm sitting there getting, you know, choked out and armbarred by like a 20-something-year-old woman who's in college. And then, you know, she's got all this stuff going. I'm getting a chance to see that and see that, hey, not only is she good at jiu-jitsu, but she has these aspirations and things like that, that give and feed into this confidence, which was a big deal. And I think a lot of a big influence on me, just because we've always tried to push the women to feel comfortable at where we're at location wise. Right. And to see the organizations catch in on that too is really cool. And that's not to, you know, say that, you know, male competition is any less, but after a while of seeing the same competitors over and over and over and over in every big event that gets put out there, you kind of want to see some new blood, you know. And it's hard for some of the guys to get on the scene just because, you know, there's still a little bit of what you'd say fight politics and some of the stuff. So there's like a good old boy system involved that, you know, maybe this guy does a favor for you, puts you on the card, maybe he doesn't put you on the card. These guys know you from that team, so they're going to put you on the card. Maybe they won't put you on the card. And with the women's events, it feels like there's a little bit more openness and acceptance of all skill levels. And so it's really cool to see that. I'm not to say that there's not any politics involved. There's politics involved in everything, but it's really cool to see them come on the scene and then to see them be so technical about it and not just either in MMA rock 'em sock 'em, but also be extremely precise, which is what you see a lot of the time. You know, like one of my favorite competitors right now is actually Maisa Bastos. You know, she's like not just fast, but she's extremely technical. And then of course you get to see like all the women that are on the card at subs on the shore. You see some pretty cool stuff, especially even out of their wrestling events that they had in the past. Because I believe they had freestyle, or I think they had freestyle at a couple of the events, and it was cool to watch them, you know, be so technical with the matches, and then being backstage trying to warm up our girls for the previous events, watching them how they drill, how they approach it. You know, it's probably just as serious, if not, I'd say even more serious than some of the guys approach it. just because they know they have a shot at making a name for themselves. There's a confidence in their skill sets. It's really cool to see them do that. So, I'm a big proponent of that. I enjoy watching that stuff. And, you know, just the simple fact too, that when you go there and you see a lot of these things, it's not like going to some of the men's divisions or competitions where everybody's kind of mean mugging you as you walk in.
Right.
It's like, oh, you're competing? Cool. Come on, let's go hang out. Or, oh yeah, we'll move over on the side of the mat so you can get warmed up. And they're really open about it. There's not a shut off side of it. And that's not every single guy or anything like that, or every single men's competition, but it really is cool to see how inclusive that they've been with their approach to things, but they're showcasing how they focus on that individual thing of just the female competitions and subs on the shore. That's a really cool, really respectful thing to look at.
I know that they are going to have freestyle wrestling. I got to talk to Madison Gwynn, who's going to be competing March 19th in Texas City at the Booker T World Gym Arena. Yeah, she's going to be competing against her, but she hasn't had a chance to wrestle since high school. She was supposed to wrestle in college. There's some things that happened, and so she's pursuing MMA, but she's super excited about it, and it'll be really fun to watch.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like watching a lot of wrestling. I enjoy all styles of grappling. I know there's like constant rule changes and stuff like that, but man, I've loved watching judo, freestyle, Greco, and all the stuff. I try to catch replays of that stuff as much as I can, follow United World Wrestling and all the competitions and stuff. So it's really cool to see that. And I think it's really cool to have, especially not just subs on the shore, having female individuals, but having a stage at which the wrestlers can kind of showcase their skills, because a lot of these events are more just jiu-jitsu based and not just, showcasing just jiu-jitsu. They're doing like multiple styles of grappling, and, respect to everybody that can do it. Because if you're competing at a high level of grappling, you clearly had the drive to be a little bit better than the average person to get there. So that's, more respect to you.
Mm-hmm. And let me see, I just had the chance to talk to some of the juveniles. Miranda Allen, I think she's like 14 years old. She's going to be competing at subs on the shore. And then I'm talking to Sofia Gonzalez, and she's on Sunday, and she's competing as well. So I'm just thinking, not only are they talking to, ladies up and down, but it's juveniles all the way up to black belts. I think it's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and they, I think it's even more of a big deal too to have the juvenile on both men and women's side, especially for the women's, just because, again, predominantly male-based sport. You don't see very many women competing in it, as far as like events catered towards just that. So the fact that you're walking in as, say, like a younger individual and looking at all these higher up people as far as like how far they've gone in their experience, man, that's a huge motivating factor, I think, to a lot of the younger generations. I mean, it was to me when I was growing up. I just imagine how it feel to any, younger female that's looking at that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So if you're just now joining us, I'm talking to Jason Soliz out of Texas Third Coast MMA. After subs on the shore, what else do some of your people have coming up?
We have, man, trying to think what's the events coming up. Well, aside from my own personal events, trying to prep actually for a wedding in October. So getting married in October. So I'm getting ready for that. Trying not to get too fat myself, but then we also got the competition wise. Subs on the Shore is first event. We have MMA fights for 3 amateur individuals, I believe on April 10th for Fury Amateur Series. I got wind of another 2 or 3 events after that, but then I'm not sure of the exact date of those. But also CGL, Combative Games League, is going on. I believe that's in, let me see if I can find the date for you for a second. That's April. I had it on here. I don't know why I'm blanking on it.
No, yeah, it's okay. It's coming up.
Yeah, it's coming up, CGL. And they have the website on there too if you're interested in trying to figure out some of that stuff. It is Saturday, April 2nd.
Okay.
And then we have another one coming up, I think, closer towards the end of July. We're looking at 2 potential dates at the end of the month in July. And so, like I said, that's a developmental league, but it's also a competition. And it's kind of cool to watch because, like I said, it takes a little bit of the barbarity side away from things for MMA.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the end of the year usually is when a lot of the jiu-jitsu comps, no-gi, start to ramp up. So there's that, helping people get prepared for different events. Like I said, we go and train at different places on a regular occasion. So there's some stuff that the other guys are helping other people get ready for. I go and try to grapple with some of my friends. I think you guys did Robert Ezel a little while back too.
Mm-hmm.
Getting to train with Robert Zell and, yes, cross train in different events and things. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming up, not exact dates yet, but uh, for sure they are on like the year spectrum. So it's pretty, I love getting ready for stuff. I like having the dates. And of course, like I said, I can't really remember a lot of those dates, but at the same time, it's always fun for me just because it's always something to work on.
Yeah, now you don't have to remember any dates. Like our phones and calendars will literally tell us where we need to go. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about your wedding. So you're getting married. Does your fiance train? Are you excited for it? Is this something you're just kind of like, okay, we're gonna do this to have a ceremony, or is it going all out, or what?
Yeah, she trains. It's Vanessa Lopez. She's actually competing at Subs on the Shore too.
Awesome.
She's got two matches actually that night, I believe. She signed up for a gi match and a no gi match, so she likes to compete a lot. Uh, she's pretty into it competitive wise. Um,
How does
as
that?
far as like I'm sorry,
I was just gonna ask, how does that feel whenever you get to watch her compete?
a little nerve wracking. I can't coach her. I try to sometimes, but I get sidetracked in trying to like coach differently, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. And it's not that it's not that we have like any conflicting like headbutting or anything like that when we're doing coaching. It's just I find myself sometimes getting a little too emotionally involved, so I step aside and let somebody else coach her. Um, I will coach some of the other athletes that we have, but I try to recognize whenever I'm getting a little bit too involved in something and trying to step back from it. Um, my my father, Professor Joe, will usually step in on that situation to coach, or we have one of the other assistant coaches step in. Like Danielle actually coaches really well. So does I think you talked about her significant other too, Brandon. He's a pretty good coach. He's actually one of our MMA coaches. A lot of experience, a lot of background in his back pocket too. Uh, so they get a chance to jump on there. About the only thing I think that's probably about the only thing I have that relationship wise is the only thing I step away from. But me and her train on a regular occasion. It's kind of fun just because I'm bigger than she is, like significantly. So to have her like kind of chase me around the floor and like, sweep me or throw me on the side and like kind of do all this stuff. It's fun for her, but it's also a little bit of a reminder to me like, oh yeah, she can still do stuff too.
Yeah.
It's fun. She does kickboxing and stuff too, even though she's not competing in it or anything like that. She just kind of likes to do the combative side of things. And then I guess the relationship issue wise with it, we don't really conflict when we train. Sometimes I'll remind her like, hey, don't treat me so nice. I want you to,
Yeah.
try to come after me because I like intensity when I train. But every now and then I'll have to remind her of that. But then she starts getting like all giggly and starts laughing whenever she catches something, or I catch her and she gets out. She'll make fun of me for it. So it's fun. It's all good.
Yeah. When I had the chance to talk to Danielle Guevara, she was saying that her husband and her, they don't necessarily train together, which I thought was a really interesting aspect. But I understand, like, you have to find what works for you and what doesn't, to reach your goals or have fun or make it work.
Oh yeah, yeah. They don't. I can't really say that they necessarily like train all that hard together. They do rounds every now and then, but one thing that's noticeable is that they actually talk a lot about training. So there's a conversation, active conversations when they're on the floor. So that's pretty cool, just because you get to see, I guess, technical interaction and thought process whenever they're doing that. So that's pretty neat. I like listening to a lot of how some people talk, just because it's fun to hear how they're looking at things, their perspective on it, because it helps me as a coach understand how I should explain things to you later on. But
Mm-hmm.
then also it's cool because maybe I missed something and you caught on to it. That happens a lot with when I'm talking to Brandon sometimes when we're talking about fights. And another coach of ours, Don Kerstetter, he's a black belt that's had a lot of full contact experience in karate, but he's also black belt jiu-jitsu now. So he gets a chance to see things, and I get a chance to get their perspectives on it, as well as Professor Joe's, and just about every other guy on the floor who's got experience has got a chance to give their 2 cents. And it's always welcome, just because I like to hear it. I'm not perfect, and I definitely don't see everything. Maybe because I'm always in it, I definitely miss more details than I should be. But I have these guys around me to constantly remind me that, hey, there's this that needs to be stuck in. Don't forget about this. Make note of this. So
Mm-hmm.
that's fun about it, especially considering the fact that it comes from a couple that's together. That's really cool. That's a different uh different thing to have in here. And we have several couples in here actually that do that too. There's another athlete on subs on the short card, Ashley Martinez, and she's competing in an event, and and her significant other are on the floor as well. And he competes actively at blue belt, and she's a blue belt as well. And he does kickboxing. She doesn't do striking all that much, not that I know of. I know she has in the past, but not quite as much. But she does a lot of jiu-jitsu competition, so they actually train together too. And it's just different person to person. It's I think everybody's got their own way that they vibe with each other. So that's if you can get it done and effectively train in the same area, I mean, more power to you.
Yeah. What kind of long-term goals do you have, I guess, for the gym and for yourself just going forward?
Well, every year I kind of like to set the goals for myself, like a long-term goal for the year, and then individual goals, like trying to work on different people. So of course, developing the fighters, but then also, of course, right now it's trying to be focused on getting this whole marriage event under, I guess, organization, just because we're trying to put together so much at one time. But as far as like the goals for the team, that's always like first and foremost, that's at the forefront of the mind all the time. I'd love to eventually be able to have multiple instructors on the floor that we can have that can run the floor separate from our actual hands-on interaction all the time, just because I know for a fact am super micromanaging. So, and I know it's really demanding on some of the coaches whenever I ask them to do certain things, just because I'm so like meticulous about individual details, or like I want things done like right away sometimes. And I know that's not ideal from a coach's perspective. So it's good to have all these other people to have them give their inputs in on it. So I'd love to have other coaches on the floor, not just the current people we have, but different striking coaches and developmental coaches. And then on top of that, as far as I guess the outlook of the business, it's kind of getting to the point to where we're having like good growing pains. So we're branching out as far as trying to develop the instructors, and also trying to streamline more of an approach to getting people better faster. And then also, I guess how you'd say, have the gym almost self-running itself, so that we can have more interaction on the floor with every individual that walks in the door, not just one day for every individual differently throughout the week, but literally be able to come in. And I want everybody to know who their instructors are, know that you talk to your instructor on a regular basis. There's a constant interaction, not, oh, well, I talked to coach last week and, I didn't see him this week. I'd love for us to have that many coaches on the floor that we can walk the floor freely and have interactions with people on a long-term basis. Because eventually, I mean, these guys, I'm so grateful to everybody that comes in, just because you got to really put it in perspective for yourself sometimes if you're a coach, because these guys come in on a regular basis and they spend 2 to 3 hours a night with us. That's time that they could be spent with their families, having dinner, getting children ready for school, spending time with the father, daughter, you name it. There's so much more that could be going on in life that they could be doing, but they choose to spend it with us. And not only do they choose to spend it with us, but they give us also the opportunity and respect us enough to take their children and teach their, loved ones as well. So they bring their kids in and teach in here and get a chance to train. And that's, in the long run, I'd love to have also a lot of families in here. We do have a lot of families currently training, but to have long-term families, because, we have 2 black belts in here that are a perfect example of that. They actually met at their coast, and they got married, and they have a daughter now, and they have trained with us since day one all the way through. And it's really cool to see how they started from white belt all the way to black belt. They've done MMA fights, jiu-jitsu competitions, and their daughters now like walking on the floor and getting to interact and watch this stuff. So it's like long term, it's also good just because you're looking at the next generation of like what you'd like to develop. So I'd like to have more instructors on the floor to be able to be freer on the floor to interact, but then also have a long-term goal of developing enough to have families come up in our gym and be able to give them access to all tools, all disciplines, all thought process available.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. That I can just visualize that, they met there, their black belts achieved that, and then with the kids there and having them train there and just continue.
Oh yeah.
That's very
Yeah,
cool.
we have a lot of father daughter, father son, mother father daughter, mother father son combinations in there. So it's really cool to see what I consider, I guess, the first generation of that.
Hmm.
But eventually down the road, maybe if they decide, oh, I want to get, their kid grows up, oh, I want to have my kid in this. That's
Yeah.
cool too.
Yeah. All right. So if you're just now joining us, I'm talking to Jason Soliz out of Texas Third Coast MMA, based in Stafford. Jason, we've been able to talk about a lot. Is there anything else that you would like to share today?
Off the top of my head, other than just the appreciation for everybody coming in and constantly spending their time with us, I think, man, if you get a chance, definitely not just sitting to talk with myself or getting a chance to kind of meet one of us and just hail us down, but definitely talk to a lot of the students that we have. If anybody ever comes in, they just want to walk through the door and just sit on the chairs outside and, talk to the people that are sitting there as well. That's always recommended. But I guess just pushing the idea of being inclusive of all types of people when they're coming in to train, just because it's and not just being inclusive of all people, but also be inclusive of all teams. Because when one group does good for us, everybody does good. I think Izell summed it up pretty well, and I think when I heard his interview on here, is he was saying, he goes and he trains at different places all the time, and he says that I believe it was something along the lines of, when one of us has a good interaction on the floor in the community, everybody has benefits from that, because you get a good, it's like writing a Google review for martial arts, everybody's benefiting from it. So that's always cool. And I guess just maybe the idea of trying to get people to be more accepting of that, instead of always being about fight mentality all the time,
Mm-hmm.
that there's more of a, I guess, inclusivity and uh, being more approachable in the community. Yeah, I'm not saying that everybody isn't. It's just it's cool to have that, and to hopefully get that to come across to the younger guys in the generation, because that's the younger guys are the ones that are going to set the tone in the future. So, that's definitely a big deal. I'd love to hopefully get that message across, is to bring more people in, help more people as often as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Jason. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, yeah.